The drums of war do not always begin with a single shot. Sometimes they begin with a currency collapsing in a crowded bazaar. That is how this particular chapter of history started. On December 28, 2025, shopkeepers in Tehran's Grand Bazaar walked off their posts and into the streets. Iran's currency had collapsed sharply, and soaring inflation and worsening living conditions had pushed the country to its breaking point. What started as economic frustration quickly became a nationwide uprising. The Iranian government answered with bullets. Human Rights Watch found evidence of a coordinated escalation in the use of lethal force beginning January 8, 2026, with protesters and bystanders shot in the head and torso. The death toll was disputed, but the blood was real. The world watched, and in Washington, decisions were being made. This is the ground on which the current war was built. Beginning in late January 2026, the United States carried out its largest military buildup in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq, deploying air, naval, and missile defense assets amid escalating tensions with Iran. The Americans moved carefully at first, quietly. Assets were repositioned, carrier groups shifted. The Gulf began to fill with steel. On February 27, 2026, the USS Gerald R. Ford was deployed off the coast of Israel. The total number of United States Air Force refueling tankers deployed at Israel's Ben Gurion Airport rose to 14, giving carrier air wings enough range to reach Iran. The intention was becoming impossible to hide. Then came February 28th. The United States and Israel conducted military strikes on Iran. Explosions were reported in central Tehran. The war had officially begun. 3 weeks later, it is still burning. Now, on March 20th, 2026, the situation has escalated further. The Pentagon is speeding up the deployment of thousands of additional Marines and sailors to the Middle East amid speculation that the Trump administration could send troops into Iranian territory. The numbers being discussed are significant. U.S. officials confirmed that roughly 2,000 to 2,500 Marines from the USS Boxer Amphibious Ready Group and the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit are shipping out from San Diego. That deployment follows closely on the heels of another. Just days before, another unit of 2,200 Marines and sailors had already left for the area aboard the Japan-based USS Tripoli. When the numbers are combined, the picture is clear. Roughly 4,500 additional American military personnel are now moving toward the conflict zone. The additional deployments will add to the 50,000 U.S. troops already in the Middle East and would bring 2 Marine Expeditionary Units to the region. The 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, made up of at least 2,200 Marines, set off from San Diego aboard the amphibious assault ship USS Boxer, sooner than expected. Reuters reported that the troops departed the U.S. about 3 weeks ahead of schedule. That acceleration is a military signal in itself. When men and ships move ahead of schedule, it means the situation on the ground is moving faster than the original plan accounted for. No decision had been made to send troops into Iran itself, 2 officials told Reuters, but they will build up the capacity for potential future operations in the region. The language of military planning is often careful like this: capacity, options, potential. But behind those careful words are thousands of armed men boarding ships and crossing oceans. The capacity being built is real. The ships carrying it are real. The Marines on those ships are real. The man in the White House is trying to manage what he says publicly. On the day the new deployments were confirmed, President Trump was presenting the Commander-in-Chief trophy to the Navy football team at the White House. As the event unfolded, an official told the Associated Press that the U.S. was deploying 3 more warships, consisting of roughly 2,500 more Marines, to the Middle East as the war in Iran continues. At the same ceremony, Trump said only that the U.S. was doing extremely well, without providing details. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was not present. Neither was General Dan Caine, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Trump said both men were in the White House Situation Room. When a reporter asked Trump directly whether he planned to send more troops, his answer was firm. "No, I'm not putting troops anywhere," he said. Then he added something telling, "If I were, I certainly wouldn't tell you." The deployments could help provide Trump with additional options as he weighs expanding U.S. operations. With the Iran war well into its 3rd week, further entrenching the U.S. in a foreign war of the kind he had repeatedly promised never to start. That contradiction is not lost on the soldiers. It is not lost on anyone watching from the ground. The military picture in the region has grown more complex by the day. U.S. warplanes and attack helicopters have been ramping up assaults against Iranian drones and naval vessels in an escalating military effort to clear the Strait of Hormuz. The strait is the throat through which a large portion of the world's oil flows. Whoever controls it holds enormous leverage. The fact that American helicopters and jets are fighting to keep it open tells a complete story about where this war's priorities lie. On one of the holiest days on the Islamic calendar, Iran fired on Israel and energy sites in neighboring Gulf Arab states, insisting that it can still build missiles and issuing a new threat to deny safety to its enemies in parks, recreational areas, and tourist destinations worldwide. The threat was noted. The war was spreading in language, if not yet in full geography. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Iran no longer has the ability to enrich uranium or make ballistic missiles, a claim that seemed almost impossible to verify from the outside. Iran's new supreme leader, speaking through whatever channels remained available, rejected that framing completely. Iran projected defiance as the war neared the 3-week mark, with the new supreme leader declaring that safety must be taken away from the country's enemies. The financial cost of the war is beginning to register in places far from any battlefield. The price of Brent crude oil, the international standard, has soared since Israel and the U.S. began their operations. Markets outside of Wall Street held up better after their wipeout, with oil prices pulling back to $108.29 for a barrel of Brent crude. Traders who had expected the U.S. Federal Reserve to cut interest rates multiple times in 2026 have now abandoned those bets. The war economy is reshaping the financial world, whether Wall Street is ready for it or not. A Reuters/Ipsos poll that closed this week found that some 65% of Americans believe Trump will order troops into a large-scale ground war in Iran, and just 7% support that idea. The gap between what the public supports and what the military machine is preparing for is wide. It is the kind of gap that, in history, tends to close in only one direction. The Marine Expeditionary Units can be used for a number of reasons, including carrying out strikes using the aircraft on board the ships or being deployed on land. That versatility is the point. The Pentagon is not building a single option, it is building many. Each ship that moves into the Gulf is another door being opened. At least 13 U.S. service members have been killed and approximately 200 wounded since the conflict began. Those are the numbers that have been confirmed. The actual weight of them belongs to the families waiting at home. The USS Boxer is now somewhere in the Pacific moving west. The USS Tripoli is already closer to its destination. 50,000 American troops are already in the theater. Now 4,500 more are on the way. The ships move in silence across open water. The orders are classified. The destination is not. The Middle East is filling up with American power, and the war is not over.